Ladies and gentlemen, Elias Lindholm is a member of the Vancouver Canucks, and it is a big trade. It took us about an hour and a half of constant refreshing to get here, but we have all of the details. I've got the whole timeline of what this afternoon has been like, and let me just start by saying it's a heavy payment for Elias Lindholm, but I'm so excited that I don't really care. Because I mean, look, I haven't been in a position that the Canucks have been buying in my adult life, really, right? Like I'm 26 years old, 27 almost. The Canucks haven't been a contender since I've been a child. Let's just start with the trade, shall we? Let me hide that. Boom. Here's the trade from the Flames official Twitter. Canucks acquire Elias Lindholm. That's the obvious one. And the Flames get five assets in return. Starting at the top, Andrei Kuzmenko, Hunter Brzustewicz, Joni Jurmo. I think it's Joni Jurmo, maybe Johnny Jurmo. Doesn't matter. He's not part of the Canucks organization anymore. A 2024 first and a conditional 2024 fourth. Don't know the conditions on that 2024 fourth, but it's a fourth, so I don't care. Unless it's one of those ones that's like, hey, if the Canucks win a round, it goes to a first, but I doubt that. So, Andrei Kuzmenko, the centerpiece of this deal, right? A guy who last year was absolutely fantastic, and we'll go through sort of each asset individually. Kuzmenko and a first are obviously the big ones. Brzustewicz is going to be seen by Canucks fans as like a really big, important piece because of how fantastic he's been so far. Everything I've seen, even with his play so far, has been like, maybe he gets to be a third pair guy one day. I wouldn't be too torn up about that. Jurmo, I'm not going to worry about at all. That 2024 first, in a perfect world, is an early 30s pick, and that fourth is obviously other than that. So let's go through, maybe we'll start with the timeline, and then we'll get into these players the Canucks are getting. Because at 4:30, Friedman tweets out, there's word that we have talks intensifying around Elias Lindholm. Then you have Kevin Weeks saying it's going to involve Kuzmenko. Then an hour later, almost, we have no extension being part of this trade being worked on. So it seems to be a pure rental, which to me is good because I think Lindholm's going to get paid. Kuzmenko then had to sign off on his no trade clause. That was some worry that was going around. And then we have the trade call going down. Then we had Chris Tanev might be involved in this deal, per Cam Robinson first, and then Rick Dhaliwal, and then Dreger sort of poured some water on that, said thought to be better as a separate deal. And then same thing. It looks like, they still are going to be working on Tanev. Then we hear about Brzustewicz, then an AHL forward, which I believe that is what we're called. That never really came to fruition. And then Dhaliwal says Tanev's not in the deal, but the Canucks won't stop trying to acquire him. That was the timeline. An hour and a half of just constant refreshing before we got those trade details. But what are we getting? What are the Canucks getting? What are the Flames getting, right? I mean, the Flames are getting a lot more than the Canucks. The Vancouver Canucks are getting a bona fide number 2 center. And based on the way that we have seen the lineup sort of shaking out for the Canucks lately, it's been a hole in their lineup, right? They've had, essentially, they've been putting the Lotto line up front with Miller, Besser, and Pettersson. That's obviously been changing a little bit. And that second line had Pius Suter as the 2C. And nothing against Pius Suter. He's been phenomenal for what we acquired, or for what he's being paid. But with Kuzmenko and Mikheyev, obviously not Kuzmenko anymore, there was a hole there that could have been filled. And now maybe, with some line shuffling, maybe we have Lindholm and Pettersson playing together while you have Miller and Besser as sort of your top unit. So Elias Lindholm, only 29 years old. So he's going for his big payday, but he has fallen off a fair bit this year. If we go down into his stats, he's been in the NHL forever, obviously starting in Carolina. He's played almost 800 NHL games and has 545 career points. 40 points in his first couple of years, 45, 44. And then he goes to Calgary and he breaks out a little bit. And part of this obviously is the line mates that he's playing with. However, 54 points in 70 games, 47 points in 56 in the shortened year. That's pretty good. 2 years ago, he's 2021, 2022, just 2 years removed from a 42 goal, 40 assist, 82 point season, right? Now, he was riding shotgun with Matthew Tkachuk, which obviously is, a big boost to your points, I'm sure. But Either way, still, 2 years ago. Last year, 64 points, and this year he's fallen off a little bit, right? 49 games, only 9 goals so far. That's the number that'll stand out. But I'm going to go into sort of the analytical perspective a little bit and the Athletics write-up on why they think that Lindholm is better than this 32 points seems to suggest. So, the Canucks are getting a number 2 center. A good one. One that, like I said, 2 years removed from 82 points. Going in return, Andrei Kuzmenko. Of course, last year he was unbelievable, right? 39 goals, 74 points. And this year he has just been in Rick Tocchet's doghouse. He reportedly didn't come as in shape as he should have been, and really just hasn't been that good. Making $5.5 million, and I will point to him being the Canucks' 4th highest paid forward at this time going into this trade, and Lindholm makes less than that. If the Canucks were going to make a trade to boost their team, their current roster this season, Kuzmenko was the one that had to go, right? Because the Canucks would need to clear cap space, and it's either going to be Connor Garland, who that third line with him, Bluger, and Joshua has been so good that right now you can't break them up, even with that $5 million price tag, because Garland's been better than Kuzmenko this year. Ilya Mikheyev, he hasn't been fantastic, but he makes a whole $1 million less than Kuzmenko does. And again, points-wise, they've been pretty similar. So Kuzmenko was sort of the odd man out, especially with Rick Tocchet seemingly not trusting him and not, putting him in a role where he's been shining. So just 21 points in 43 games this year. I assume, he'll see a bit of a bounce back. But what this also does for next year, keep in mind, that Kuzmenko contract included next year, right? $5.5 million next year. If the Canucks don't see Andrei Kuzmenko getting back to that 40-goal level, even a 30-goal level of player, that's a negative value contract, right? So clearing that cap space and then having Lindholm's contract expire this year now frees up $5.5 million for next year. So that's an asset that we sort of need to think about as well. Hunter Brzustewicz. Really highly touted prospect, drafted 75th just this last draft, right? So a 3rd round pick who undoubtedly right now has more value than a 3rd round pick because of this unbelievable season he's having. 69 points in 47 games as a defenseman. He led the OHL in scoring for a good chunk of the season. I don't know if that's still the case. But the Canucks are essentially saying, hey, we liked this guy a lot at 75. Obviously they picked him. But we don't see this being who he ends up being, right? They're saying, hey, we are going to sell a 3rd round pick, and let's be real, 3rd round picks usually don't turn into bona fide NHL players, let alone stars, right? Maybe Hunter Brzustewicz turns into a solid 3rd pairing guy in the future. That's very possible, but he's worth more right now because of that potential upside than he likely will ever be in the future. That's not to say he doesn't turn into an absolute stud and torture the Canucks for the next, 10 years. That's possible, but they're taking that bet on, hey, maybe he's just on an absolute heater right now in, junior hockey, and maybe that doesn't translate to the next level. So they're getting the most value possible out of him. And they also throw in Joni Jurmo, who was an 82nd overall pick in the previous regime in the 2020 NHL entry draft. He's playing in Sweden, SM Liga. That's Finland, right? Europe. I don't know. But he's only played 6 games this year. Oh, no, sorry. He's played 34 games this year. He got moved. But this is probably never a player that's in the NHL, at least solidly. So I'm going to call that part a write-off, right? That's probably just a throw in an asset. So let's go into why the Athletic, at least, actually, I'm not going to show this on screen because I feel like maybe that's kind of, they make you pay for it. So let's go to my face and I will read you an excerpt from this Athletic article, essentially saying in 2021-22, when he had that fantastic year, he was playing with Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau, 2 phenomenal players, right? Then they both left. So then he played with Tyler Toffoli and had 62 points, did very well. But then Tyler Toffoli left, and now he's playing with essentially nobody. So enter Vancouver, where now maybe he's playing with Elias Pettersson and Ilya Mikheyev potentially, or riding shotgun with Miller and Besser, or something along those lines. Elias Lindholm is a guy who needs playmakers with him. He's a really good supporting piece. Whereas guys like, JT Miller, not as much of a supporting piece, right? He can drive things himself. So that's why the Athletic, at least, Drance and Harmon Dial, think that he's better than potentially that shows. Now let's go to the analytical perspective. I got lots of tabs open here, guys, because I've been refreshing for over an hour. Jay Fresh, let's start on his analytics. This stuff on the left here is all projected. Keep that in mind. That's based on his last 3 years. Let's focus a little bit more on the right-hand side, the graphs. WAR percentile rank. That 82-point season, he was like 90th, 95th percentile in the NHL, or at least based on his position. Last year, he dropped to about 60th. And then this year, he's been bad, right, in relation. But where you see the things that have fallen is if you look in this bottom graph, right? This offense versus defense versus finishing. Offense is the dark bar. He got 82 points that year. They only had him at like 60th percentile. Dropped a little bit last year and dropped pretty heavily this year, right? He's only 29, maybe reason for that to bounce back, but his defense has improved in that time as well, right? I think Lindholm, could be a pretty decent asset on the power play, taking Andrei Kuzmenko's spot, 80th percentile on the power play. Maybe not a great penalty killer, but a forward that can come back and play some decent defense, potentially. The big thing that you see is this finishing has absolutely fallen in the gutter, right? He went from one of the top finishers in the NHL to mediocre last year to abysmal this year. That's something that you hope will sort of balance out over time. Kuzmenko, on the other hand, not as much to go off of. Obviously, you see that big drop in wins above replacement. You see the big drop in offense and defense and finishing. I mean, we've seen what Andrei Kuzmenko has been this season. Dom Lucian, his analytics, I'm a little bit less familiar with, but we do have percentiles, which helps me. So offensive, he's projected to be 73rd percentile offensively, 45th percentile defensively. And Dom's quote says, Elias Lindholm feels like a really good get for the Canucks. Feels like a seamless fit as their 2C with some shutdown potential. He's having an average year, but should be better with more support. And that's essentially been the entire picture, is that Elias Lindholm has been bad with bad line mates. You put him with some good players, and he plays even better. Here's Kuzmenko's card if you would like to look at it for reference. Contract-wise, $4.85 million expiring this year. He is a UFA. So the Canucks do shed salary as Kuzmenko is making 5.5. Here's my search for Elias Lindholm so I could get pictures for the thumbnail. And I'll just do a quick refresh because they probably already updated it, and they have. People at Cap Friendly are wizards. And yeah, it takes a lot of money off the books for next season. They still have zero cap space because they are obviously dipping into LTIR. But they have about $2 million open up now in deadline cap space when I think they had about 1.2 before. So it opens up a little bit of cap and maybe a bit of flexibility if they do try to go down the Chris Tanev road, which I would love to see. I would love to see Chris Tanev back in a Canucks uniform. So my overall thoughts on the deal. It's a lot to pay. The acquisition cost is high. However, I am in a really good place with this because I haven't seen my team go all in a while. And today I'm sort of thinking if everything goes perfectly in a perfect world, today is a day that we can look back on as, a big day in the history of my sports fandom, right? Whether it's the Seattle Seahawks signing Mike McDonald as their head coach, which I'm very stoked about, and maybe Elias Lindholm helps this team win a championship. What it does, though, is it makes this team better today, right? Moving the only things that affect the actual roster today for this team that, keep in mind, is first place in the entire National Hockey League. Andrei Kuzmenko is out. Elias Lindholm is in. That's an upgrade. It's a straight up upgrade. And sure, they get rid of a first and a fourth and Brzustewicz and Jurmo as well. And that might hurt in the future. But for right now, I'm just enjoying the ride. Let's see what the Canucks do. Let's see if they can go on a run, because guess what? There's still a month until the trade deadline. They're not done. Make sure you're subscribed for more. Canucks After Dark emergency podcast tonight, 10 p.m. Clay and I will go more in depth than I did here somehow. And we'll go over everything over the course of maybe 30, 45 minutes. So make sure you're subscribed. Link is down below. I will see you later.